So hello, everyone. We're so happy to have you with us today. My name is Christian. I'm a co-founder of MakeSense.org, a nonprofit I'll tell you more about. And I'm also Obama Foundation Scholar at Columbia University. And I'm joined today with three amazing leaders that you will hear more about it. So I'll do a short introduction about the roundtable and then introduce the speakers we have today for the Respond Days. So as most of you know, if you're attending the Respond Days conference, startups are everywhere. They are often presented as a powerful tool to build the future because they fuel innovations. With Make Sense, the nonprofit I run, we run Impact Investment Fund, Tech for Good Startups Accelerator on multiple continents. But as much as I see how useful startups are as a tool to build change, I also see the limits of this approach. Questions like, is the startup universe diverse enough to understand the social innovation needs of our societies? Are startups the most effective tools to build positive change at the speed we need, especially regarding the climate crisis? Or should it be completed by other approaches? As you may know, Respond, which was initiated by the BMW Foundation, operates at the intersection of tech innovation and responsible leadership to promote sustainable change, and is exploring just those questions in order to do more than startup acceleration. During this roundtable, we will have the chance to explore those questions with experts, leaders in building positive change and innovation. It's from all around the world, so there's many different time zones. Join me in welcoming today Kealoha Fox, who is Obama leader for Asia Pacific, and also a native liaison at Aloha Care, and also working on climate topics. She'll tell you more about it. We have Kristina Lunz, who is a BMW Responsible Leaders and the CEO of the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy. And I think you're joining us from Germany. And then we have Usman Iftikhar, the CEO of Catalyzer, as it's put on your screen, and who's joining us from Australia, and who's also an Obama leader for Asia Pacific. So it was a long introduction just to set the frame, but if you guys can introduce yourself and tell us the change you're trying to achieve and build, and maybe we can start with Kristina, if you're okay.
Yes, very happy to. Thank you for having me. Such a pleasure to be with you in a room, in this digital room. I'm Kristina. I'm the co-founder of the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy. So we are trying to bring feminist analysis and feminist demands into foreign and security policy, because as just like society as a whole, foreign and security policy traditionally is very patriarchal. That means there's a lot of emphasis on military strength, on military dominance, on oppression, and we're trying to shift the whole discourse towards a focus on human rights and human security. And we're doing that because research shows that the most significant factor towards whether a country is peaceful within its own borders or towards other countries is the level of equality. So when all those governments around the world are talking about contributing to sustainable peace, it will just not possible without kind of a feminist approach, an approach that tackles oppression, that tackles inequalities. And as such, like the big challenges that we have from climate, from the climate catastrophe to pandemics, to militarization and so forth, can only be tackled if we're working together internationally and with this human rights oppression smashing focus.
Thank you, Kristina. Kealoha, can you take the mic next?
Of course. Thank you so much. Aloha. My name is Kealoha Fox. Firstly, I'm a mom and a scientist and a leader. I'm 12,000 kilometers from you right now in Munich. I'm actually 12 hours in your past in this beautiful Pacific archipelago called Hawaii. I operate as the senior advisor to the Institute for Climate and Peace, and my work supports this climate justice organization building equity and climate resiliency from a community-led response approach, especially centering communities that are most affected by climate change, and for communities who have a tremendous amount of sustainable solutions right at their fingertips, who are also doing the least to cause the climate emergency and the climate crisis that we're currently in. And we found that in the Asia Pacific region, there really exists relatively little work that's effectively centering the human experience to the ways in which we respond, not only to stressors and triggers and trauma, but also the potential for opportunities, action, and solution. And so that's really our work at the intersection of climate and positive peace building, is that urgent need to catalyze a body of action that centers justice, equity, and of course, diversity in the way that we look at sustainable solutions. We believe that a sustainable future is really only possible if we sustain our humanity with one another and we sustain peace for many generations ahead. Thanks so much for having me here, and I'm really looking forward to our dialogue today.
Thank you, Kealoha, for being with us a bit late for you in the other side of the world, but on the same ocean, but not the same side of the globe, if I can say. Usman, you're joining us from Australia. Can you tell us more about you and the work you're doing?
Thanks very much for having me, and really great to meet everyone. So I'm joining from Sydney, from Australia. Also the land of the Gadigal people, and one of the traditions we have here is to respect our Indigenous cultures and elders. So I want to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to the elders past and present, where I'm speaking from. It's really a privilege to be a part of this amazing group of people, and also some fantastic questions that we're going to be discussing today. My background is that I come from a migrant background, originally from Pakistan. I moved here to Australia back in 2013 with a background in engineering. Initially struggled to find meaningful employment after studying and doing a master's here, and then decided that if no one else is going to give me a good job, I'm going to start my own business. So that led me down this journey of starting a business called Kealoha, which is a social enterprise. And what we do is we help support refugee and migrant entrepreneurs who are coming to Australia. And we've been running now for the last 5 years, and have helped over 500 amazing migrant and refugee entrepreneurs who we call migrantpreneurs. We've also recently expanded into New Zealand. And I've also been looking at other issues and working in other issues such as climate change and climate tech as well, using my engineering background and also in impact investment. So over the last sort of couple of years, have been involved with various different groups, including the Obama Foundation, who are doing a fantastic job, and really looking forward to the dialogue today, particularly exploring climate justice and some of the work that other panelists are doing as well.
Thank you so much, guys. It's really early in Paris, and I had a bad start of my day with my bike stolen, but like just hearing you guys and all the work you're doing is already making my day way better. So thank you so much. So what I suggest is that I prepare the questions for each and every one of you, and then we can go more into a discussion. My first question will be for Kristina. And it's on a topic you explain your work on. And I read one of your interview online, and you were saying a quote that I really love, which is like, you have zero tolerance for social injustice. And when I think of drivers, that leaders like you guys, or like what I've been doing as work, what drive like really inside ourselves, the drive to build change is really this intolerance for injustice. And in the startup universe, especially, the numbers regarding women and men inequalities and access to finance, for example, to raise funds, the numbers in France are really bad. It's only 2% of the startup led by women that are being financed. But in general, in social, in technology, in the STEM education, there's a big inequalities between men and women, which is kind of bad because it's basically women are half the population, and it's like they're not don't have equal access to build the future through technology and startup. So what do you think could be done to change that, and why this matter to you?
Yeah, that is like a huge problem of injustice that you just raised. And I mean, it's called patriarchy, right? For 4,000 to 6,000 years now, we've been living in a patriarchal society. That means that all power and all resources are accumulated in globally speaking, in the hand of white men from the global north. And then within countries again, it is in the hands of a kind of more elite and upper class group of men. So that fact leads to what you just mentioned, that like not only power is passed on from men to men unjustified, but also resources unjustifiedly passed on from men to men. So the numbers you just mentioned, that is also figures from the US. It's only 2 to 3% of venture capital that is given to female founders. And in the social entrepreneur area that we are working in, it is not better when it comes to financing female-led and women-founded enterprises and startups. Adding to that, in our particular case, what is also problematic is that there's barely given any funds to feminist work, right? Because patriarchy doesn't fund those who want to smash it. When at the same time, we know that only once we upend this like really unfair patriarchal system that keeps passing on resources and power from very small group to another small group, unless we upend this, we will not have a society where everyone can strive and where everyone can enjoy their human rights. What we need, so I mean, we have these components, right? Women not getting money, feminist and human rights work not getting money, and civil society in general not getting any money, right? Where all resources, I mean, it's a society where all the benefits and the wins, the returns, they're privatized, and all costs and externalities, they're put on the community as a whole. So that is the system. But the privatization of capital, that is very well funded, like there's all the money, and those who are trying to kind of fight the externalities, like to step up for human rights and supply chains, for climate justice, and like make the world and society more bearable and more beautiful for all of us, they're left with hardly any money. So we need to completely rethink how money is given, not only like fairly split between the genders and between different other groups of population, the global north, the global south, people with disabilities, with non-disabilities, but also like really look at the capitalist system that accumulates the money in those who are making more capital and leaves civil society with barely any funds, and like really leaves all of us here struggling to do the human rights and the justice work that we're doing. So what we can do, I mean, there are thankfully very many ideas, right? Of course, we need more female and justice-oriented investors in the private sector. We need quotas in a way that we cannot no longer have over-representation of like a certain group of people in decision-making aspects. In Germany, we're working with a company, we started working and with a network on really rethinking how we're financing, right? Where businesses and those who have in the capitalist system made millions or like a fair amount of wealth, that they really feel the responsibility that they have to cross-finance civil society because they're benefiting from all our work, right? But they're not transferring any of their resources to us. So we need system changing approaches to kind of stop this really unfair distribution of power and resources.
Thank you so much, Kristina. And we'll go deeper into these issues of inequalities just after in the question. My next question is for Usman. So I've been doing research and I've seen that only 18 months after you launched your project in Australia, you were awarded the Commonwealth highest honor for young achievers. And you helped more than 50 what you call micropreneurs, so migrants who become entrepreneurs, with amazing success stories. And for you and in your experience, how can we make the global innovation startup scene more diverse, especially with migrants being more welcome in starting companies? It's a big problem. Same in where I live right now, and I can see it in France. Although the biggest entrepreneurship success stories are usually migrants, you know, like when you look at Google, all these companies, it's people who are immigrants at the beginning. So tell us how to fix that, because you've been starting to do quite a lot of good work in Australia already on this.
Thanks very much, Christian, for that question. And this is definitely a huge problem globally. That obviously, there's large number of people who migrate, and then there are issues that they face in terms of unemployment and particularly underemployment, because oftentimes people are skilled and qualified, but they're unable to sort of find work that's not relevant to what they sort of studied, or sometimes the industries, or there's language barriers, there's cultural barriers. So a lot of different problems that people face when they migrate. It doesn't matter how they're migrating, so whether they're economic migrants or they're going in as refugees to different countries, and that's a problem that I personally faced, and so I've have that lived experience of that issue here in Australia. I decided I wanted to do something about it. In terms of the initial, I guess your point around migrants and refugees being amazing entrepreneurs and case studies, yeah, there's a lot of those case studies out there, and we've seen whether you look at Silicon Valley and the sort of classic startup entrepreneurship all the way to sort of small and micro businesses, the migrants have been doing really great, and really the reason why I believe is because the migrant journey is very similar to the entrepreneurship journey, right? Think about leaving everything and that you've always had behind and moving to a new place, starting afresh. It's very, very hard. And when you think about, starting a business, there's a lot of sort of those traits that you need, that you develop as a migrant, that you can also utilize in starting a business. So we did some research here locally in Australia and found that over 33% of Australian small businesses are run by first-generation migrants, which was done by an organization called CGU, Small Business Insurance, and they found that, and that was fantastic. But the really good thing that we found was that out of those 33% of business owners in Australia, who were migrants, 83% of them did not have a business in their own home country. So a lot of them were actually coming to Australia and starting their businesses as like the first thing. And so we really do believe that, if we do put more focus on this, and there's specialized programs and support available for migrants, refugees, to help them start their own businesses and utilize their skills and potential, there's a huge sort of net benefit, not only to the economy, but also to the society. I've been involved in a project which was developing a policy guide on entrepreneurship for migrants and refugees, and how that can solve issues not only for the economy, but also thinking about solving the Sustainable Development Goals. And there's a whole policy guide that was actually developed by UNCTAD, UNHCR, and the International Organization for Migration, that was published and launched at the World Investment Forum back in 2018. It's still available online, so for anyone who's interested in finding out more about what's happening in their own country in supporting migrant refugees, and particularly in terms of entrepreneurship, they can go and have a look. Also look at some of the really interesting programs, how they can be implemented in their own context as well. And then there's a global refugee entrepreneurship network that I'm a part of, which is and Kealoha is a part of, which is run by this organization called Center for Entrepreneurs in the UK. And they really try to bring together different organizations like us who are trying to do this work across Europe, across Southeast Asia, across Americas, and other parts of the world, to be able to sort of share our knowledge, share our resources, and see how we can help each other. So for anyone who's interested in finding out more about both starting a program like this, whether you're in government, whether you're a startup, or you're a funder, or if you're interested in if you're already doing this work and interested in being a part of a network, there are opportunities out there that you can be a part of.
This is really amazing, because the numbers and the data you shared, like 33% small business, is really not what politicians say when they talk about refugees and migrants and try to get fear out of people, like, oh, people are going to take your job, and it's going to be a big topic for the presidential election in France, I feel. But I'll look at the data you shared and make sure that we can communicate about it. So Kealoha, I read your interview with the Obama Foundation, and in one of the interviews you were saying that the advice you would give to young people was to be active in local government and shape policies. Which is not often something when you're young, you feel like, oh, I want to go work in my local government. Like now, most of our generation studying are like, oh, I want to build my company, a startup, especially when you do studies. But in this world where that it's becoming more and more shaped by tech innovation, why do you think like being involved in shaping policies is one of the best ways to avoid leaving people behind and make sure the world we create is more fair? Why do you put such a big focus on that?
Well, maybe if the news headlines taught us anything this week, I think that there is a real nexus point between technology and policymaking and the ways in which we look at risk and harm compared to the ability to do good and have a mission-oriented focus to the work that we do day in and day out. For me, as an Indigenous woman, people like me are not the first ones to be invited to the table. But in my experience and my ability to contribute to my own community and my own homeland, I've been able to see that with policy, we have the opportunity actually to create a new table. And that at that table, we get to decide the rules. We get to decide who has a seat. And if we don't want seats, and if we want to sit outside in the grass, connected to this planet and the place that we love, we can actually decide those ground rules as well. And I think that that's a lot of what our generation is trying to do right now. We can throw out any old playbook or blueprint that we want at this point. I think COVID-19 has really showed our generation that we have the opportunity to build a future that is not yet known to anyone. There was no solution or playbook of how we were going to survive and sustain ourselves during the pandemic. And I don't think that there's any one singular panacea of how we're going to do that through this climate emergency. But I think our generation as young leaders is really standing up. And like Kristina had said, we're really committed to systems change. And I think part of that systems change is that intersectoral and cross-sectoral work where we're able to have great democracy and good governance and great policy making that represents the majority and creates more equitable solutions right alongside good business and good company related type of work that we do in tandem with NGOs and community-based work and grassroots organizing as well. I think what we see at the Institute for Climate and Peace and the Obama Foundation is that in reality, it actually takes all of us working together with our greatest strengths and all of our gifts to come together and to be representative of the entire population and to really come up with those solutions hand in hand, that not any one of us have any of the answers. But when we come together, we're actually greater and stronger, and that the solutions that we come with will be much more lasting and we hope will be much more beneficial to all. And that's a real core, I think, to an operational guiding value that each of us can take with us as we go into our journeys, go back to our organizations and companies and the teams that we create. There's a huge bright future ahead for all of us. And I think so much of it for me is really when you have a great idea, know the foundation of what your mission is. When you start to see the return on your investment, really double back to ensure that the walls that you have built are just, in our language, you call that pono. Make sure that your work is pono to all that you're bringing into your network. And so we have a saying in Hawaiian language, it's a traditional proverb, okay, kahua mamua, mahope ke kukulu. You have to set a firm foundation first, and then you build upon that framework and shape its impact. That's the legacy of a leader. And I think that that's also the legacy of what good governance, democracy, and great policy making can look like for us to build a diverse and sustainable future that I think we're all looking to talk about here at the Respond Accelerator and this event this week.
This is really amazing because all of you guys in the different fields that you explored were saying like some things we could do in order to bring more, like strengthen the role of innovation of marginalized communities, indigenous people in this field, and also women. And the question that I have these days in my mind always is that we see that there is solutions and ways to build incremental change, but on some issues that affects us all, and especially like indigenous and marginalized communities like climate and the environment, the time is like we don't have much time, and it's becoming more and more urgent. And in the innovation world, everyone say, okay, it's okay, we're gonna have innovation is gonna save us and all of that. But for you as professional in building change, and what is the best ways on the environmental topic, especially to create consequential change in a short time frame? What is your best suggestion you would tell to all the innovators and entrepreneurs who will listen to this talk? Who wants to start?
I'm happy to jump in if no one else is. It's a great question, and I don't think really any of us really have a sort of answer that is, the right answer. But I do believe that if we have to solve these really complicated problems, we definitely have to do them together. I think that's the biggest thing, particularly for startups and for entrepreneurs, is something that they need to look beyond just themselves. And what Kealoha was mentioning are really thinking about the systems change. How can they come together? What are the different ways in which they can really sort of tip the system over? And sometimes you need to build that power together and work together to be able to try to change that system. So that's one thing that's really important. I think if there's anything that this pandemic has told us is when there's a will, there's a way. We've seen the whole of governments and different, civil societies, startups, different organizations, everyone deciding to work together and to really try and save people's lives in a very short period of time because of this pandemic, right? Which has also been evolving and a continuing threat. And we need a similar effort and something even actually bigger to solve climate change and really, attack it in that sense. And that's something that, yes, we haven't seen the sort of same way. We've seen, I guess, different people looking at it in different ways, but also it's because the urgency, it has been different for different people. So, if you are in the Pacific, for example, in different islands, the sort of way you think about climate change as an existential threat is very different if you're in Australia, having a sort of stable life to some of the other places. But again, we are starting to recognize, yes, climate change affects, some people more than others, but it is still at the same time becoming a great equalizer. So we had the bushfires here, a couple of years ago, which were really devastating. And I think a lot of people in Australia at that time really recognized that, the urgency to take climate action. And I think that the kind of effort and the movement we need to build, really, I think there's a lot of lessons we can take away from the pandemic response that we've all been involved in.
I recently spoke at the German Parliament at a committee on peace building, and I spoke about climate justice, and I said something to which one of the politicians, the MPs of the right wing AfD, asked me later on. I came in as an expert to the session, and he said, "Well, you were just talking about inequalities and climate, but I don't get it. Like the sun shines equally on everyone, right?" He was, of course, trying to delegitimize my point, what I was making. And the point was that we need to talk about climate justice, right? Because it's not only about global warming, but it's about global warming in a highly unequal world. And unless we're tackling the issues of justice, as we're trying to tackle climate justice, we will not we will anyway not come out of the climate crisis, right? It will always stay, even if we manage to stay around 1.5. But if we're not tackling injustices while tackling climate justice, the system will only disproportionately affect political minorities even more. So that is the whole idea about climate justice. It's global warming within an unequal world. And if we're working on climate justice, we need to put those at the forefront that have historically led the fight against climate justice, and that is Indigenous people, right? The whole global justice, the climate justice movement came out of the struggles and the fights of the Indigenous community globally against colonizers, because with colonization, that is really when the extraction and of natural resources started. And with colonization, this is when it started that this living with nature in kind of harmony was upended, and all those who kept doing it were considered minor human beings, right? And this is how colonizers started justifying exploiting and oppressing native communities, for example, because they thought, wait, they're not exploiting the natural resources, so they must not be proper human beings, so we need to oppress them as well. And in evidence-based research also clearly shows a whole range of important links that we must not forget as we're tackling climate justice. And that is, for example, the more a country oppresses women and other political minorities, the more this country oppresses Mother Nature. So exploiting people is directly related to exploiting our environment. For example, speaking of the leadership of indigenous communities in this struggle and people in the global south who are disproportionately affected. I mean, there are numbers that show that indigenous communities globally, they own 18% of land, but they protect 80% of the biodiversity globally. And it's the numbers tracking of, for example, Global Witness shows how it is disproportionately, again, indigenous folks in countries like Mexico and Colombia and the Philippines who are killed for their work of protecting the land. So with all the innovation that is happening in the climate sector, I think it can only be climate just and really helping to stop this unequal system if we're putting the knowledge and the struggle of those that have been leading for so many decades and centuries the fight for climate justice at the forefront.
Thank you, Kristina. You want to rebound, Kealoha?
Yeah, I was really struck the heart of the urgency that we feel right now. And I feel like for me, that urgency means we're not waiting to be saved. Young leaders and entrepreneurs are the change makers who are taking this overwhelming urgency and using it as fuel for our own agency. I feel like we're the very embodiment of social impact being far more important than any short-term financial gains in our own profit margins. And I think that that's really at the heart of what that urgency has taught us and why our generation really represents quite a different outlook and ethos for the future.
And to rebound on what you're saying, Usman, Kristina, and Kealoha, so to make this transition, climate transition, more just, you need like climate justice, and you need to bring a more diverse group of people, and especially the people who are being the most marginalized and the most affected by this crisis. And there's a lot of talk, you know, in the corporate world, especially, oh yeah, let's bring more women, let's bring more minorities and things. As leaders who are leading in this field, what are your suggestions so that all the entrepreneurs and people building ventures, watching this video, and policymakers really make change to bring more diverse set of people within their organization, so that they can have all these perspectives in mind and try to find how they can participate in changing the system and not just reproducing old patterns? Well, how do you make sure that this real change happen? What have you seen or what have you done that really makes a difference, and it's not just words?
Well, I would like to see accountability. I mean, the different ways of, for example, the private sector and the non-for-profit sector of like really coming together, right? Because the movements, be it the feminist movement, the anti-racist, the indigenous movement, those movements that have most impacted society for the better and led to more human rights and human prosperity for all of us, that's been social justice movements. That's never come out of the private sector. So we need for those who have the means, as in financial means, to make a difference, to get in touch and collaborate with those who have also the intellectual and the means of like community organizing to work together. And every time, I guess, also companies fail to bring this knowledge and like really this will to rethink the system that is so oppressive for the majority of the world, when they fail to bring this knowledge and those means together with their business as usual, I want to see justification for that. How in a world that is currently, as per the United Nations, on a way for 2.7 degree Celsius increase, which will not be a pleasant world for many huge parts of the world, there's like no time left for any like empty words and like impact washing. We need social justice community organizers to be brought in with those who have the financial means. And if it's not happening, accountability and justification why it's not happening.
I totally agree with Kristina. For me, in the plainest way, you have to walk the walk. Everyone here is at Respond as the brightest minds, from entrepreneurs and investors to policymakers and visionaries. It's really about our time to make sure that we represent a different style of leadership and that we build our own organizational culture that really values this in every way that we think and behave and represent the work that we're doing. And I think that so much of that is really transcending generational, ideological, and social divides. And for me, part of what we have to do in our own accountability is really look at at ourselves in the mirror and really, notice in our own work that this is not window dressing, and that these are not just labels that are a part of an advert or part of decor, right? This is in what you do every day. Everything you put out, from a brochure to a new program, to a different, product line, it really should speak to that organizational culture and the types of values that you hold as a responsible leader. And I totally agree. I think a lot of that is centered in our own accountability. And mostly, I think we have to be accountable to ourselves and start to look into the mirror a little bit more, so that we're checking when things are going really well and we're maximizing and we're on the rise, right? That's the best time to go back and really think about, are we doing the things that we said we were going to do 3 years ago or 10 years ago, and make sure that we're not mission drifting or shifting outside of that scope, because that core is always going to be the foundation to, I think, what brings us back to doing what's right and doing what's just, and doing what really represents, I think, true innovation in the spirit of what innovation, I think, holds to us in a culture of proximity, to that word being so now, but also very future oriented.
Thank you. Usman, do you want to rebound?
I guess I agree with both of you as well. And I think you've sort of put it really, really well, articulated really well around both that personal responsibility piece, and what we can do as individuals and those habits and cultures, but then also looking at the aspect of accountability and transparency and real action and putting that into work. So I don't really have anything extra to add. I think that everyone on this call, you've all been doing this work already, and I think that for a lot of people who want to look at how you can do it, you can actually look at some of the really good case studies and people who are already doing it. What are they doing well? What they're not doing well? What you can learn from them and sort of follow. And I think, Kristina, you made this point earlier around sort of First Nations people and Indigenous people who have been, taking care of this planet for thousands of years. And so, there's a lot we have to learn, and we are just getting started. And so I think that if there's any place we should turn to, it's that.
Thank you. And you guys, this is a big question I had of the urgency, and you made me way more hopeful. But the thing that got me scared a bit a few weeks ago was this recent survey by the Lancet and Havas. They did a study on youth all around the world, and they found out that 75% of youth aged between 16 to 24 years old were thinking that the future was scary. There was some really crazy statistics, like 1 youth out of 5 ready to sacrifice themselves for climate, especially. And so this is something that really struck me, because I was like, it's not even like, oh, the problem are big and stuff, but the younger generation who will be the most affected by this issue especially is starting to lose hope. And you guys are on the front line every day trying to fight this injustice. And it seems like you're okay and hopeful, and and you keep going, and it's a marathon and you're running it, and like you're spreading hope around. What is the message you have to the young people who are watching or want to be innovator and make a difference? What should they tell their friends? What is your recipe so that you keep fighting and keep the hope alive? Because that's the first thing to do, at least to try to make a dent in the issue. So what is the things you would like to tell this younger generation, even than ourselves?
Shall I? But I'm also happy for someone else.
Go for it, Kristina.
It is important that you're mentioning these statistics, right? Because in the whole conversation, and yes, I think it's fair to say that all of us are very hopeful and positive. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing the work that we're doing. But at the same time, it's important we all accept kind of this tolerance of ambiguity, right? Two very, very, very different feelings can exist at the same time. And to get really personal, for me, in my very early 30s, the climate crisis is the main reason why I'm not considering having children, for example, because I do not want to give this pain onto another human being that I am feeling and that so many of us feeling. It's about existence, and I'm daily enraged when I realize that so many other people do not see what is happening in front of our eyes. Having said that, I am very positive and convinced by the impact that I've had in the past, and the people that I've been working with, the feminist movement. I personally, through working on changing laws in Germany and other things, with the wider feminist movement, like we have changed systems. We've been changing systems, and hence why I believe there's a good chance that we can continue to change systems, like especially the three most oppressing systems, that is racism, misogyny, and capitalism, right? So we need to work on these three. Just lost my train of thought. All right, and that is what I would like to pass on to kind of the younger generation and everyone who's listening. Like, be unapologetic. Like, we have no time for like rosy talks and bubbly words. We're talking about a climate emergency. We're talking about millions of people not being treated with the human dignity that all of them deserve. We're talking about, especially over the past couple of years, and we're working on that quite a bit as my center, on unprecedented attacks on human rights, especially LGBTQI and women's rights. So as everyone working on social justice and social change, be unapologetic and demand social change. We don't need like those individualized solutions that the current system always tries to give, right? For example, saying to political minorities, oh, you just need to demand more, you just need to be bolder and stuff. No, we're trying to change like literally the system. And so, yeah, keep doing that.
I have a sort of different message, but that's really focused on, I guess, the people and themselves. And this is something that I sort of also struggle with personally, is to be able to continue to stay hopeful, especially, you know, with all the news and everything that comes out every now and then. And I think the core message that I can pass on is to be kind to yourself. I think it's really important to know that, you know, you've mentioned this, the marathon, there's a lot of work to be done, but know that, you know, this is not just on you as an individual. We all have to work together, and there's a lot of amazing things that are already happening. There's a lot of amazing people that are doing this work, and so you just have to support them, and you have to be a part of that, and also pick your battles and know what is it that you're good at, what is it that you love doing, that you can sort of spend your energy on, and do it. You won't be able to solve climate change on your own, because it's a huge, you know, mammoth task. But at the same time, every contribution matters. And so be kind to yourself and really, you know, look after yourself. I think particularly with the pandemic, with our sort of continuing to rely on social media, you know, everything else that's been happening, it's just become more and more of the echo chambers where everyone's looking at it and everyone's looking at, you know, bad news all the time, you know, just, and I think that that's also leading to some of the mental health issues on an ongoing basis. So really look after yourself first. And really see, you know, what is the contribution that you can make? What is that unique contribution? We all have a lot of potential, and I think we can really sort of, you know, show up in different ways and be part of this movement. It will definitely take a lot of us, if not all of us. So, you know, just be kind to yourself and take care of yourself first before you actually go out and try to solve things like climate change.
For me, you know, I'm always hesitant to give advice to younger generations, because I feel like we are in an era of mutual exchange and reciprocity where we're all teaching one another. We all have an opportunity to mentor and to mentor others. And so I always try to start there first. Though I recognize this important, you know, topic. is always one that I come back to, because I know hope can waver, right? Some days are better than others. I sit here and, you know, it's been a tough day, and it's been a heck of a month, right? That hasn't really gone any of the ways that I've needed it to, but I have no other course to be hopeful, because I have this little boy in the room next to me right now sleeping, who needs us to be, and my community needs us to be, and our islands that are being threatened by sea level rise need us to be. And I think for me, whenever I get the opportunity, as a sometimes professor, with my students, one of the themes that I continue to come back to is just be ready and stay ready, learn, observe, gain skills, you know, because you're going to get a call, and we're going to ask you to join us, because we need you for the long term. And we know that for most of our communities out there, especially the Indigenous, immigrant, and gender inclusive communities that we've spoken about today at this roundtable, we know that greatness can come from the margins, that creativity really lies in that peripheral, where action can be deeply profound, and it can mean much more than just ourselves doing it alone. But we can't really let that terminology of marginalization, I think, become synonymous with being less than or less important. Just like the next generation or somebody quote unquote younger than us is not less than or any lower of importance. I think for, you know, everything that I wanted, you know, to kind of think about what I would share today in just being able to have this conversation with you folks that I've really loved and has brought me a lot of hope and has brought me a lot of energy in what's been a hard month is it's really about being bold and being fearless and being you. And there are no wrong answers to what we're doing right now. And I think because, you know, all of us here, we have the opportunity to be invited into these spaces with a lot of privilege and a lot of ability to speak our minds. I will say that more often than not, I am always inspired by these groups. And there are always people that I end up following and staying connected with. And that's the hope that gets you through the really tough months like the one that I'm having and my family's having right now. It's because we're able to really stay the course and to just be big in our ideas and be really fearless and unapologetic that, no, you know what? I have the right answer and the solution is right here. I'm going to stay humble and I'm going to be really values oriented as a responsible leader. And I'm also not going to waver when I know that my solution and my abilities and gifts to deliver on that solution is going to be good for everyone. And I think that that's so much a part of the diversity to the conversation that we want to bring about. It's not just about sustainable companies or sustainable startups or sustainable businesses. It's going back to what I had shared at the beginning, and it's about being sustainable people. And it's about having a sustainable humanity that's willing to take those bold and courageous leaps forward that we've all been touching about today that are more than are more needed and greater than most of the spaces are willing to give any spotlight or time to really at the moment.
Yeah, and I love it because all what you explain, Kealoha, Kristina, Usman, like to be bold, be unapologetic, want to have big dreams, even if it's hard, and do it is really like the mindset of entrepreneurs. And most of the people who will watch is just bringing an intention of being aware of the context we're in and the inequalities and injustice, and just have that intention into how we put our energy and entrepreneurship. But this is like, have been a fantastic round table. I'm way more happy. It's the beginning of my day for me. So now I'm like, wow, this cool. Didn't start well, but now I'm so happy. But I would like to make sure you can say everything you wanted and also share recommendations on the Respond accelerators and programs, but also anything you have on your mind. If there's a last message you want to share, please feel free, and then we will close the roundtable. So I don't know if anyone has something else they would like to share, or thoughts or a recommendation.
I'll share, because we're speaking to entrepreneurs and business leaders and visionaries across different sectors. I think, one of the things that I wanted to also touch on is be a great community leader within your own neighborhood, within your own family. I think it goes back to what Usman was talking about in self-care. I think so much of what we're being called to do is pressing, and it's important, and we're stuck to our computers and our emails and all of the great work that we're doing. And at the same time, we have to care for the really heart of why we're doing this work. And I believe that much more of us could be involved in community grounded leadership. And that doesn't mean that you have to abandon the work in your company or your startup or your intervention. It just means that find time, carve out time so that you can do both, because it's really enriching. And that's a way that I've brought a lot of balance into the different hats that I wear. And some of the greatest leaders that I've been able to spend time with and learn from don't just do one thing all day, every day. They really have a diverse portfolio. They have a diverse set of networks and colleagues and friends that they lean upon. And I have found that makes them stronger, more effective, and more successful in any of their endeavors. And that's, I'm hoping that that's what folks are doing right now at Respond is they're networking, they're trading contacts, finding ways to collaborate and partner in the work that lies ahead. And in doing so, I think we build great community leadership. And I think that we set a firm foundation for what the theme I've kept coming back to is a new generation of responsible leadership that is truly inclusive. And that's not simply talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion as a human resource course, right? It's about the way in which we have a practice, and that practice becomes a community of practice that we share with one another and that we grow together.
Usman, you and I, would you like, okay. Shall I? Okay.
All right.
I think and it's something I touched upon before a little bit already. It's the kind of the relationship between the private sector and the non-for-profit sector. I would like to see this changed. I would like to see this on eye level. It is very often that I realize that it's not on eye level, not only looking at the distribution of capital, but also when, and for example, we are approached by big firms, whether their employees can volunteer at our organization, believing that we can do with someone who's not as expertised and skilled and highly trained at the best universities globally, having worked for the United Nations, people in my team and governments, that just others can come in and work for us and do that charity. So it's like so many instances when I realize the expertise that we have in the private, in the non-profit sector is just not equally valued. When we are, okay. And so we need this to change. And then of course, for the financial transfer happening from the private to the non-private sector. And also, as this is also about kind of the whole conference about impact investing as well, right? And that being kind of this hot topic more and more. Just want to, I'm a bit worried of how useful it is, right? If we talk about impact investing, when in the end, and some data show that when investors expect same levels of return and interest from social enterprises as for private ones, right? That to me is impact washing. That is not impact investing, because the biggest return to your money should be the work we're doing for society. That should be your interest, and not hoping to get any money out of those who are making society better. Yeah.
It's a really good point, because as you're saying, the impact investment field is like really growing exponentially. And so there's been some things happening in microfinance, for example, which showed that sometime when you ask for the same return, than you think you can do good and have the same amount of money. There was some mission drift as a word which was used before, and it's something that could be scary. Like, let's hope that there was a internet bubble in the 2000s. Let's hope there's not going to be a mission drift impact investing bubble coming, and that's a really good point. So everyone watching and willing to start funds, really listen to those leaders and rewatch the video before. Thank you so much, Kristina and Kealoha. Usman, do you have a last word you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I think it's been a really, really great discussion. And I think at the heart of this, as we sort of started talking about diversity, and that's such a critical point that oftentimes we have different lenses and ways in which we view diversity. But no matter what our sort of, I guess, way of viewing diversity is, it's really important to think about having other views and often opposing views involved in the work you're doing, because that only strengthens you, right? So, you know, we're talking about people from migrant refugee backgrounds or people from indigenous backgrounds, women, you know, who, you know, should have a seat at the table or should be involved in all the work that we're doing. And we can't get that sustainable transformation. We can't actually move to a world that, you know, has solved some of these problems unless we don't bring everyone on the journey. So we absolutely need to work on bringing everyone on the journey. It's not easy at all, but this is something, if there's only one takeaway you take from all of this, is to make sure that you collaborate, to make sure that you always strive hard to be as inclusive as possible, because that's how, you know, you can build a movement that's stronger and that can sort of, you know, go through the different challenges that we're all facing.
Thank you so much, guys, for joining from different sides of the world. The Obama Leaders community is all across the world, hundreds of leaders like you guys, same for the BMW Responsive Leaders. And I've been in both communities and seeing those hundreds of people working to build social change and social justice. It's like, feels like part of a big team. And so everyone out there who want to build change and feel lonely, just join one of these teams, and together we're going to try to make it work, even if it's not easy. Thank you so much, Kristina, Kealoha, and Usman, and good night for those of you going to sleep, and good morning for those of you starting your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.